SATs.
Oh, no. One of the biggest things I think when it comes to homeschool is keeping my kids away from your bad kids.
Who should decide what's being taught?
One side is labeled as a bigot, white supremacist, homophobic.
When you're being taught that, oh, there's this many genders or anything like this, where you haven't been exposed to that in your own household, it's being presented as like the end-all be-all when it actually isn't. It's about educating and not indoctrinating.
So a child says, I thought boys could not wear makeup. I have an X and Y chromosome and I'm wearing makeup. I could factually answer that without indoctrinating with any opinion.
We have to make sure that we're respecting parents and their beliefs and their values.
That includes not perpetuating parents' beliefs in the classroom as well.
The discussion centers around what is education, what is the purpose of education, how should Christians think through that, homeschool versus public school or private school. Here's the deal. Before I jumped into this ministry, before I was a pastor, I was a public high school teacher. So let's have a very important discussion. Welcome back to Wise Disciple. My name is Nate Zala, and I'm helping you become the effective Christian that you were meant to be. I'm a speaker currently, and I was a pastor for a number of years, but before all of that, I was a public high school teacher. I taught at Clark County in Las Vegas, Nevada. If you are a parent, if you're an educator, you're a student yourself, then this video is for you. Got a heated debate between Christian parents and liberal, perhaps woke even, teachers. Why are we doing this today, Nate? Great question. Thanks for asking. A lot of us Christians are trying to think through the question of education. Where should students go to get education? What kind of education is appropriate for students? And a lot of parents, both Christian and non-Christian, are answering the question with homeschool. But how did we get here? Is there a breakdown of trust between parents and public educators? And where does this breakdown of trust come from? That's what I would like to talk about in this video. So let's look at a Vice debate between, again, Christian parents and liberal, maybe progressive, woke teachers. We'll find out on what the purpose of education is, who has the right to say what students learn. Should parents not have a say at all in that? They also disagree about what's better, public, private, or homeschool. So we're going to get into it. By the way, real quick, make sure to check out the Wise Disciple store where you can get a shirt like this. Yeah, this is part of our Peace series up at the store. God is bringing shalom back to the world, one soul at a time, and we can participate in that. Amen? A lot of great stuff at the store. I hope you check it out. All right, without further ado, let's jump right in here.
Let's just start really broadly. What's the purpose of education?
I think the purpose of education is twofold. One, to help build and support the individual, but also help build and support society as a whole. Because even though you may not have a kid in education, you pay taxes to public school because we as a society depend on and need education for society to work.
I think the purpose of education is
So I understand that these kinds of videos are heavily edited, and so there may have been more that this educator said, but this answer is, I don't know, pretty vague. I don't even know what she means. You know, she could be saying lots of different things here, you know, to build and support individuals and societies. Okay, how? To what end, right? I mean, if this were some kind of teacher objective written on the whiteboard inside a classroom, there would be no way to measure that. Now, I have my answer to this question. Maybe you have your answer, but let's hear some of the other answers first.
educate and not indoctrinate. And I think that in a lot of ways we've strayed from that in the original purpose of what it's supposed to be.
I think it should be intelligence and character. I think you should be able to understand the world around you and understand who you are and your purpose and try to make the world a better place. I think that it has to be a mix of the skills, you know, memorizing the formulas, you know, understanding the world around you, but then also what to do with it.
And just
So I agree with this answer, and this is pretty close to my answer. You know, the purpose of education is to develop the skill sets of the next generation so that they can use those skill sets to become productive members of society and to develop their character so they know how best to use those skill sets in order to bless or flourish the society that we live in. There's a beautiful line in Jeremiah 29:7. As a matter of fact, take a look at this. Jeremiah 29 verse 7 says, "But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." In the city's welfare, God's people will find their welfare. And this fits into the grander picture of what God is doing in the world, which, again, is bringing shalom back to the world. Shalom means peace. And so we as Christians, right, as Christ's shalom makers or peacemakers, Jesus had something to say about that in the Gospels, we should be transforming the whole world into the garden that we find in the beginning of Genesis. And we should be training our children to have that same mindset through whatever particular trait or skill set they develop. I mean, there's a lot more to say about this biblically. So let me give you a couple more things to think about, right? Proverbs 16:16 says that wisdom is better than fine gold, right? To get understanding, it's better than choice silver. And the word there in the Hebrew for wisdom, it can also refer to technical training, technical skills. That's why in Ephesians 6:4, well, look at this. Ephesians 6:4, fathers, hello. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but, here it is, bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So Ephesians 6 tells fathers, bring your children up, right? Again, paying close attention to the language here. The original language, the word for discipline is paideia, which is the Greek word for education. And so the Bible places the responsibility of education on the father, on the parents. And so education, however that looks for different families, right? Especially right now in today's culture, it must be aligned with God's desires for our children. The Greeks understood this to a degree as well. They knew, as do Christians, that paideia, it's not just technical training for a job, it's also the formation of the mind in keeping with a good and moral character. So that's why I say we should be thinking about the same things when it comes to education. Development of skill, yes, but also development of a student's character.
To go off that, the idea that education, you have to balance the importance of memorizing the quadratic formula while simultaneously addressing social and political issues respectively. So children have both the know-how, general knowledge, and also kind of self-awareness and character so they're able to develop their own opinions.
Yeah, I think that the purpose of
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to disagree with that. And I'll probably circle back around to this, but, while children should be encouraged in later years, like in adolescent years, to develop their own opinions about certain things, the idea that all of education is just creating an environment for children to, they just make up their own minds about everything. That's a recipe for disaster. And that's, I don't know what this person is suggesting here, but we're at the beginning of the video here. But I'm trying to create some helpful distinctions as we go along. So in other words, there's no way freshmen in high school are going to have the requisite base knowledge of ethics to start determining what is the best course of action with regard to moral dilemmas. Whether they wrestle with these like in reading literature or studying history or even ethics, they first need to be taught foundational principles so they can go back to that well and they can draw from that well in order to think for themselves later. And when they're being directly taught foundational principles, that should not be open to debate. So in case you were wondering, yes, I'm more of a classical style educator.
education is to understand the world that you exist in and use that understanding as a means for creating change or even understanding yourself on a deeper level.
Activist. We have an activist in the room, right? Did you hear the activism in that definition? All right, be quiet, Nate.
I believe the purpose is simply just to prepare the individual to be successful in the society that they exist in.
Critical thinking, learn how to live out your full potential so you can be independent, and everything else really flows from there.
The purpose of education is to prepare children for the real life and also make sure that they are literate.
So I think the purpose is to raise the next generation of leaders. And when you think about what you want your leaders to be like, you want them to be knowledgeable and you want them to be compassionate. You want them to be self-aware. You want them to understand the best way to move forward, not just for themselves personally, but for their whole community.
So that's the whole room. So we heard from the whole room. And I want you to notice the majority of the folks in this room articulated the purpose of education without talking about shaping character at all. Did you notice that? A couple of people did, one that I can remember particularly, but the rest did not. And so that raises an interesting question. because I would say that this is where a lot of the clash lies, right? And maybe you've not really wrestled with this yourself all that much, but here's the question. Is shaping a student's character one of the fundamental purposes of education? Some of you at this point are probably thinking of, public education. I'm not talking about public education or private or homeschool right at this moment. I'm just talking about education overall. Does education entail shaping a student's character? Actually, let me know in the comments right now. Whatever you think, I'll circle back around. This is live, so I'll circle back around and see if I can get your answers. What do you think? Because my answer is yes, it absolutely does. As a matter of fact, there is no classroom teacher that does not already say and do things to shape his or her students. Character education is already happening. It's just a given.
Talk about who's doing the educating. Who should decide what's being taught?
Parents. I think that parents should have a huge say in what's going on in the classroom because it's their kids, not ours. As a public school teacher 15 years, I was always aware that these are not my children. We have to make sure that we're respecting parents and their beliefs and their values.
I think the Constitution agrees with that.
Yes.
Here in America, ranging back to the early 1900s, plenty of Supreme Court cases have ruled in that favor that it is the parents' right ultimately to decide a child's education, medical needs, etc.
I would push back though and say that there does need to be collaboration, right? I completely respect your idea of it is not our job as educators to put forth a belief in front of children, right? That includes not perpetuating parents' beliefs in the classroom as well. In my opinion, that would be keeping a non-biased viewpoint, simply presenting issues, and then allowing kids to decide for themselves.
I would agree.
That is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, notice the way this person is talking about it. We should collaborate with parents, guys. But then what that really amounts to is determining which beliefs and values that should be taught in alignment with parents and then which ones to reject, right? But then again, the question is still the same. Who gets to say which to teach and which to reject? According to this person, the answer is, well, the teacher in the classroom gets to say. But wait a sec, does the teacher have beliefs and values? Doesn't the teacher determine which of the parents' values to reject based on the teacher's own values? So this isn't a non-biased enterprise at all. There is no one who is unbiased. You assume biases going into this discussion, but you should never believe that the classroom is an unbiased environment. That is hot Cajun garbage fire. That's just not true. And the teacher is biased. That's the thing, Of course they're biased. If they're a breathing, thinking person and they have a heartbeat, they have a set of values. Because guess what? Everyone does.
Agree that I think it needs to be a collaborative effort. The way that we decide curriculum in Texas is that work groups comprised of community members, educators, parents, even in some cases students and public service officials come together to draft curriculum plans, and then it's ultimately decided on by our State Board of Education, which has a lot of kind of assistance from parents as well. So I think that kind of format can be really effective because it also empowers students to become involved in the fate of their education. And as a student myself, I think that that's incredibly important because our perspectives need to be heard as well.
The voices of parents need to be heard in that equation. But unfortunately, what we've seen recently is that parents' voices have been demonized in this process. You've seen parents who've criticized local school boards labeled terrorists simply for caring about the quality of their education that their child is receiving. These teachers are temporary caretakers. When they come back home, it's the parent who has to explain that this is this radical belief that was put in front of you. This was this idea that you've never been raised around that parent now has to explain. And at the end of the day, that isn't just confined to a classroom. Now it's bleeding into their upbringing. And there's only one person responsible for their upbringing, and it's the parents. It's not the educator, it's not the teacher, it's their parents.
The reason why I wanted to look at this discussion with you is because I think that this Vice debate is a wonderful microcosm of a huge disagreement going on around the country right now. And this disagreement, it seems like, is just getting amped up every year. And if you're a parent or an educator or even a student, you're probably aware of this disagreement, or you're at least sensing the tension between, say, parents and educators specifically. If I can characterize this tension in a helpful way, which is really why I just wanted to do this video. I just want to put words to this, okay? It's largely not because of academics. It's because of values. In other words, the educators of today, many of them, do not share the values of parents today, particularly Christians. And that's primarily where the clash exists. Okay. So again, putting words to this, right? To what maybe many of you are sensing, but just have not been able to articulate. And so again, this raises an interesting question. If the purpose of education is to equip students with skills in order to become productive members of society and to develop and shape their character in order to use those skills well, then what happens when the educators no longer share the same values as the parents? This was not even a discussion several decades ago, because even though many people several decades ago were not Christian, they at least shared the same basic values as Christians, as parents today. But that is increasingly shifting as each year goes by. And that means this is the $6 million question that everyone should be wrestling with. What should we do when more and more educators and administrators no longer share our values?
I like the idea of the collaboration, and obviously parents' voices belong at that table. I also like the emphasis on students having a say in this, and also other people adults that aren't parents. I'm invested in that too, even though I don't have children of my own. And I hear what you're saying about having to, like, parents needing to confront or address, I guess, like what kids are learning at school. But giving kids the exposure to other ideas or other things that they wouldn't be exposed to otherwise is, I think, part of what's going to help raise the next generation of people that are able to look outside their own lived experience.
But I think
the language that is being used right now in this discussion is entirely unhelpful to draw out proper clash, right? So if you've seen some of my debate videos, this is what I mean. Clash. Clash is when you get two interlocutors together and they wrestle with issues. That's what you're looking for in a good debate is clash, right? So I'm just putting on my debate teacher's hat for a moment. In order to do that, you have to define terms. So what does this person who just spoke, this teacher, what do they mean by ideas? What do some of these folks mean by collaborate? Right? I want parents' voices at the table. What does that mean? Do you want their voices but not their values? Is that what that means? That actually would be a really good question to ask. That's a question that I would ask if I were on the panel. These kinds of clarification and diagnostic questions need to be asked if we're going to have a proper disagreement on this issue. And again, it comes back to values, right? So you're going to maybe get tired of me hitting this same guitar note, but it's about values. Some of you are probably thinking to yourself, oh, this person doesn't have parents, therefore they don't have a right to say. No, it doesn't matter that they don't have children. Or yeah, this person doesn't have children, so they don't have a right to say. It doesn't matter that, they have kids or they don't have kids. What matters is, do their values align with ours? That's it. Somebody who has no children can still share our values, guys. That's right. Notice too that final sort of, ending to that sentence there, right? They said, let's help people look outside their own lived experience. Okay. That usually is a code phrase for postmodern progressivist views of truth. Do you remember this? I talked about this in the unbelievable debate between Calvin Robinson and Dr. Espinoza. Did you see that one? You can go take a look at it. It's in Pastor Reacts there in the playlist. Truth, according to progressive folks, is a social construct. It's not an objective fact that is discovered. And people's lived experiences, there's the code phrase, they help to construct that truth. Okay? That's why somebody's lived experience is incredibly important to progressivists, right? Let's bring this and put it on the table too. Now, do any of these people know that on the panel here? I'm fairly certain, this particular teacher does who used the phrase, but does anybody else? Maybe not. That's why it's important to find definitions of terms in these discussions so you can get at the heart of the issue and you can truly clash, or else this conversation will not be as productive as it could be.
I think that oftentimes those different ideas are presented in the classroom as a student as the only idea. When you're being taught that, there's this many genders or anything like this, where you haven't been exposed to that in your own household, it's being presented as like the end all be all when it actually isn't. It's about educating and not indoctrinating. As long as that is presented as a counterpoint to, well, there's people who believe this, but there's also people who believe this, that's okay. The reality of it is that in most classrooms across the country, that isn't what's happening.
And to piggyback off of that, one side is labeled as a bigot, white supremacist, homophobic. There's a lot of parents in America that are Christian or, they believe in two genders, gender binary. And if you say that as a teacher, especially, you could be labeled as homophobic. So there isn't this unbiased classroom because there's one side that can't really be, as loud as the other side without risk of, losing our jobs even.
But you two are kind of the ones that brought in the conflict of like, there is an indoctrination going on and only one side it has this opinion and this side is not allowed to talk and we have to be quiet. When really you guys are actually the loudest in regards to this issue thus far, right?
Right now, yes,
So,
in this
so,
room,
so I
yes.
wouldn't necessarily say that that's the quiet. What I would say though is like, I do want to push away, if possible, but I'd love for you to hear this, right? Is that idea of someone sees me and they go, oh, you're one of those that teach that there's 72 different types of gender. Desmond Fambrini, he, him, gender fluid, bisexual. My students do not know this because it doesn't come up because I'm a learning specialist and it's my job to educate and teach a curriculum, right? Now, if I'm asked directly by a parent or if there's confusion, oh, why do you wear makeup? Same reason why girls do, because it's fun for me. It doesn't need to be this very controversial, I'm gonna mess with this child's upbringing, they're gonna go home and they're gonna turn into a gender fluid and they're gonna think there's 72 genders.
I think that's a question.
What the? What? So let me get this straight. This teacher, Desmond, says his students don't know that he's LGBT because they don't talk about it, I guess. But wait a sec. Parents go to him and ask why he is a biological male wearing makeup. Where did the parents get the idea to ask this question? Do you think it's because their child came home with the same question? Come on. That's utterly ridiculous. My students don't know that I'm LGBT unless they actually look at me with their eyes and see my face, right? Does anyone actually believe that the students have no idea what's going on with this person, with Desmond? Look, I bring this up simply to point this out. There is no such thing as an unbiased classroom or an unbiased teacher. Desmond is literally the same person who claimed a few minutes ago, there is no bias in classrooms, guys. And it's obvious. They are biased. They're totally biased. Why? Because everyone is. And the sooner we can wrap our minds around that, the sooner we can actually cut through the noise and have a better conversation about education.
You say you should go ask your parents about how they feel about that.
Well, so,
And
okay.
teachers are supposed to teach reading, math, science, the things that are actually going to make them contributing members of society. Answering a child's questions about whether or not men or women should be wearing makeup or not is, I don't think, within that realm.
Okay, so you said science, right? And so we're talking about a physical science, we're talking about human anatomy and biology here. So a child says, I thought boys could not wear makeup. I have an X and Y chromosome and I'm wearing makeup. I could factually answer that without indoctrinating with any opinion.
But it's in no way scientific, your answer to that question.
How is that not scientific?
I would say maybe cultural or it's a perception or an opinion, but it's in no way scientific.
Anyone else?
It's not scientific. It's an issue of values. Again, are you seeing this for yourself? It's not about facts. It's not about science. It's about whether men should express themselves this way and why that matters. That's an issue of values. So here's the question that follows. Because this is an issue of values, why, Desmond, should you be the one inculcating your values to students? Did parents get a vote on whether your values are part of the curriculum they want their children to learn? I think that's a much more interesting question.
I am a chatty person, so I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to let's see if anyone else has something to say.
So I just had one question for you, because not all homes are welcoming or open to conversation or safe. So how do we balance that?
I think that what we're saying is that there are certain conversations that are not to be had with a teacher. And I think that the argument that a lot of people on the right and conservatives are making is that we just don't feel as if actors of the state should be having conversations that are taxpayer-funded conversations with children about conversations that have not come up in their own households. And to that point, if you can't talk about God in the classroom, why can we talk about every gender under the sun, right? I think that's the conundrum that we find ourselves in. If we are banning those conversations, we've banned those a long time ago, then how can we have these conversations just because they belong to a different side of the political aisle?
So I think we actually talk about God in the classroom all the time, right?
Yeah.
Who's taught religion? Who's taught world religions? Who's taught history in the way that, Puritans, and that's okay, because God is part of the fabric of history and whatever else.
We talk about it from a development perspective. This is how Christianity originated. This is how Islam originated. We don't talk about this is what this gender is, and this is if you feel this way, then there's gender affirmation therapy, all those things.
I think you...
So this young man gets so close to saying it, and then he just stops short. It's about values, y'all. So we teachers do teach about God in the classroom. I did as well as a literature teacher, especially as I went through early American literature with students. God was on the lips and the minds of early American authors, right? You can't miss it. So from like a historical perspective, different teachers can broach the subject of God in the classroom. But what about whether or not believing in God should be normative for students today, or normative for the average person in society? That's a question of values. And that's the question that should be posed to all these teachers. Can someone teach about the fact that many people believe in more than one gender? I think you can. I think you should, actually, even as a Christian parent, Christian teacher, whatever. I think students should know what's happening in society today. But is the subject being taught in a very factual, clinically descriptive way, or is it also being taught as normative? And if so, why is it being taught as normative? That's a conversation that, as far as I can tell, most parents are just not having with educators. And if they are having it, it's like, they're trying to, but it's not clearly articulated and thus not very productive. All right. Hey, real quick, we're having what I think is probably one of the most important conversations to have. I would really love for more people to know about this. Would you help me by liking and subscribing to the channel? I really do try to make videos that have a lot of value for you guys. So if you could help me by liking and subscribing, I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, back to the video.
Actually bring up a really good parallel of, like, I feel comfortable and I feel like it is okay to talk about identity issues the same way we talk about God. Not indoctrinating anyone, not telling this is what you have to be or you have to believe, but saying this is something that some people believe.
But in the sense of gender identity, I don't see that parallel. How is that making someone more literate, more successful?
What I hear you saying is that learning about different gender identities does not make somebody a more considerate, well-rounded person, but learning about different religions does make you a more considerate, well-rounded.
I'm saying that is a part of history. I don't understand where
okay.
gender identity falls within what we should be teaching.
Religious history and God comes into play in terms of history, cool. But don't gay people and trans people too? It's not like I'm the first transgender person to ever walk this earth. Like, there are trans people that were, and gay people who were part of major movements in this country, like from the civil rights movement to the feminist movement to, I mean, obviously Stonewall. Like, isn't that part of history too?
Let's just take a step back. So just show of hands. Who here thinks public school is the best option for kids? Okay. And who thinks private school is the best option for kids? Who thinks homeschool is the best option for kids? And then some of you guys didn't raise your hands at all.
It's so challenging to pick one right answer for that, because essentially what you're asking is, who do you trust the most with your children? Who do you trust to give them the cultural values that I have, and then fill in the gaps where I don't necessarily know the answer, but I trust that they're experts and are going to give my children the attention that they need in order to develop so that they can be a better version of themselves.
So this is my guy. This guy who just spoke knows what's going on. He knows that it comes down to trusting educators to inculcate values into students, just as much as it is, training them and equipping them, math skills, science, all that stuff. The answer to this question, right? Homeschool, private school, public school, the answer is, it depends on your situation and location. Maybe there's some great private schools with teachers that share your values. And maybe, now this is challenging for some of you to hear, right? Maybe it's public school. Maybe there are public schools where there are Christians in the classroom. Maybe there are public schools where there are Christians as administrators. I know they exist. I wasn't the only Christian in a public school, guys. Now, let's just look at it from all angles. That's becoming less and less of a reality as time goes on. I acknowledge that, but it still is technically true that these situations exist for students, okay? But maybe the reality is homeschool is the only option where students get equipped and their character is developed in positive ways as well. But it's just, I hear this so much with Christians who talk to other Christians about the education issue. They say, it's just this one thing, guys. It's just this one thing. Homeschool, it's only homeschool, guys. It's not. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And anybody telling you that it's only public school, it's only private school, it's only homeschool, they're not helping you think through your options clearly enough.
If I had to choose one, it's public school. It is the best tool we have to give everybody a chance at a good education, no matter where you come from, how much money you have. Public schools, where not everybody thinks the same and people are coming from all walks of life, is a good microcosm of that global experience, where you can learn critical thinking skills and learn how to be a good community member, because not everybody looks like you or thinks like you.
Kali, you were shaking your head.
Well, first of all, our schools are more segregated ever than our public schools, especially in blue states. New York and California have the most segregated schools.
True.
And on top of that,
By the way, self-segregated. The students are segregating themselves, and in some cases being very vocal and morally self-righteous in the fact that they are self-segregating, which is just stunning to see.
we are in a place where our public schools are not safe, especially the last 20 years. And I just don't see why sending our kids to these environments where it's unsafe. We also used to be, because I used to be on the left, we used to be against the institutionalization of our children. These kids are being institutionalized, having these places where there's 2,000, 3,000 kids. I'm okay with public school, but the problem with it is that it's become an environment where it's almost like the school to prison pipeline. We used to talk about that in the 90s. We're not talking about that anymore. And I think that's something that parents need to wake up about, and America needs to wake up about, the institutionalization of our children.
I talk about the school to prison pipeline
Yeah.
all day, every day. And I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, the school to prison pipeline refers to the idea that zero tolerance policies at schools affect students in ways that set them up for prison time. So if you have zero tolerance policies and students continue to get in trouble and eventually they get expelled, they'll eventually land in jail as juveniles and adults. And folks track this and call this the school to prison pipeline. That's what they mean when they're referring to that.
Saying that it's terrible that there are parents who are sending their kids to schools that are not safe. However, what about the parents that don't have a choice? I'm thinking about the most marginalized community when I said public schools here, because I agree with you, the public schools have a lot of work to do to become the safe places where our kids are not in institutions where they're ignored or not giving the services they need. And also, for the people that don't have a choice and that is the only option their kids have, I just believe that's worth fighting for. That's why I said public
Absolutely.
schools.
I'm a big advocate for school choice.
Well, why don't we just show of hands? Who believes in school choice?
Can you just specify what do you mean
So
by
that's
that?
where parents can apply the money that they pay to taxes. They get vouchers, and they can put that into any school that they want. It's very popular in red states right now, and a lot of blue states are against it, especially teachers' unions are against it, because it's taking money away from the public schools and creating more of a competitive market.
Right. That's why I wouldn't raise my hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Sometimes with school choice, it gets a little bit tricky, right? My first class the first day, I had 25 students. By day 2, I had 19, because 6 parents switched out of the class because they saw me, and they were like, there's no freaking way, before I even got a word in.
As a parent, I would want to know, do you not think that is okay, or they're right to withdraw when they see you? Because ultimately, you're probably an excellent educator.
I appreciate that.
I have no doubt about that. But I think we get into muddy waters when we start trying to take that choice away from the parent.
Do I think that it is okay for a parent to see me and go, not around my kid? No, I don't think that's okay. I feel like that's really crossing the line, because you are, for lack of better words, discriminating against me openly. That's like seeing a black teacher and being like, there's no way. It is the same. It is the same.
It is not at all. Not at all. You see how this kind of stuff can be said? When we don't acknowledge where the true clash lies, it lies around values. If parents are, it's not about this person's decision, to do what they want in terms of who they love or whatever. It's about their values. Now, some of you are thinking, well, but you can't disentangle the both. I'm just saying the parents' decision to pull students is because it largely entails the fact that they don't want their children to learn the values that are going to come from somebody that doesn't share their values. In this particular way that Desmond does, right? If parents are concerned, that's what this is about. It's about a bisexual man who challenges societal norms by wearing makeup on his face. Parents are thinking you're going to inculcate those values in their children, particularly at ages that parents believe students are too young to even broach those specific subjects in the first place. So again, when you understand that this is about values, then you can quickly see that this is not discrimination over skin color or anything else. As a matter of fact, I bet you'll find a large number of parents that are tolerant of LGBT folks teaching their students as long as they trust that LGBT values will not be inculcated in them. But see, now we're back to the very issue at hand. Parents do not trust liberal educators any longer, and that explains the behavior of parents pulling their students from certain classrooms.
Still the right of the parent to make that decision as to whether or not they want their child to learn from you.
Okay.
Like, it's still that parent's right. Like, you can disagree with their motivations, their motives, their ideas,
Would you
but
say
it
that
is still their child.
This started around school choice. Even if you want to decide on a different learning environment for your kid, the people that do not have the option to send their child to a different place, the bar should not be so low. And that's my concern with school choice, is that sometimes people think that if everyone flees to the suburbs, who is teaching in these schools where everyone has decided they don't want their tax dollars going to? And that's one of the big concerns. With funding of education being the way that it's set up, it essentially makes it so that the people that are stuck with these as their options don't end up with as good a school. And everyone deserves to have their kid go to a good school.
Well, if there's
Well, I'll circle back around on that one. The question is, how do you measure whether or not a school is good? What is the metric to determine that? Because I got news for you. It's not simply money for better technology and free and reduced lunches. You have to consider the content of the education, which, again, brings it right back to equipping and values. And for some fascinating reason, the ones who are against school choice, many of them also happen to be against traditional values. Weird how that works out, guys.
school choice, they won't be stuck with those options. They can have other options. That's the whole point of that. Also, it is the school district's job to appropriately use those budgets. Most of the budget in the schools aren't going to the teachers. We got cafeteria workers, janitors, all of these people that are getting paid.
It used to be 9 out of 10 people that were employees of schools and districts were teachers. Now it's 50-50.
Yes.
So there is some mismanagement of funds in this country. We actually fund our kids really well.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Too many administrators.
Just to go back a little bit to like when you guys are raising your hands about the different choices, you raised your hand for homeschooling. Can you talk us through like why do you think homeschooling is the best option?
If we look at the history of this country, a lot of people were homeschooled. A lot of our founders were homeschooled. Like they only went to school till 3rd grade, a lot of them. And I think what has happened is parents have decided that the government is going to do a better job at raising their children than themselves. We have also come to a place where school is taking up the majority of our day. And we have this mistrust of parents that they can't educate their own children. And I think that that's wrong. I think that a lot of parents, and if you look at homeschool data, like my friend Phil right here, he's got 7 kids and he's homeschooling them all. And actually homeschool kids are turning out really well.
I think you bring up a lot of very valid points, but I have to say, and I just want your opinion on this, I would never homeschool my own kids. And I want my kids to be smarter than me, than I ever was. How am I going to have a child that is smarter and does better than I do if I'm their only teacher?
You grow alongside your child.
Okay.
I think as a teacher, I feel like I've learned the most in my life as a teacher, like more so than in college. And, so parents becoming teachers is actually good for them as well.
Okay.
And even in the public schools, a lot of teachers are relying on the lesson plans. But speaking from experience, I got to give the credit where it's due. My wife does the homeschooling in it, and I've watched that process of her learning alongside, to make sure when they ask these questions, I'm getting knowledge on the material as well so I can help you get through it. Nothing replaces that value, that bonding time that she gets to have with the kids.
I taught high school for 6 years, and I quit. And I'm a stay-at-home mom with my own kids. So we're a one-income family. We're lucky enough to be able to live off of my husband's salary. Would you say that most homeschool families have one parent working?
I do think the statistics show that is the case.
It's like the only way to do it well.
Pretty much. And, another misconception, though, is that they think it's a matter of income and homeschool families have to be rich and et cetera. And I think the average homeschool family makes like $65K. So the reality is they're scaling back and making sacrifices for this lifestyle because they value what is coming out of it.
So let's just say that for the people that homeschool isn't an option, what is for so many people it's not, I do not think that school choice is the way to go about that, which I know is a lot of people's answer to that.
Yeah, I don't think the criticisms of school choice have a great argument. The effects of parents pulling their students from schools for better educational options, clearly has a detrimental effect on the public school. The question that nobody is asking parents is what is causing you to pull your students from that school in the first place? If they did ask parents, I bet the school would learn that the reason is actually fixable without the use of a lot of state funds. Because in many cases, again, it comes back to shared values. And that doesn't cost a school anything to align its values to parents. By the way, I've been saying values this whole time. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I'm not talking about theological values, right? Like, I'm not talking about biblical values. I mean, it is included in what I'm saying. But I also just mean, the category is bigger. I also mean values with regard to strong work ethic, right? Like you'll find a difference in values between, say, a private school or even a lot of charter schools and a lot of public schools when it comes to minimum F, right? Or equitable grading. And minimum F it's where a child gets an automatic 50%, even though they don't do anything for the assignment. They just automatically begin with a minimum F. A lot of people, including myself, would argue that the effects of minimum F leads to a decrease in a child's work ethic. And that effect is values-based. It goes back to what I was saying. It's more than equipping a student to be productive. It's also about inculcating values in order for these students to know how to use their skills well. Are there other concerns like safety and academic rigor and availability of technology that causes parents to utilize school choice? Sure. But we cannot ignore the fact that parents want schools to inculcate values into their children. And I'm not hearing anyone talk about that when it comes to these discussions.
Can we just get Sean in here? What are your thoughts on this?
School choice gives people an exit ramp. You get to send your kid to a school that best fits what you think is best for their development. At the end of the day, it's kitchen table conversations about we've worked hard to raise a family. We want to spend our money in a way that best fits our child, best fits our family. And when you don't have school choice, you do make those trade-offs. There are real consequences there.
The school is considered one of those shared spaces, one of those last kind of shared spaces where you might bump into someone who maybe comes from a different background than you, has a different ideology than you. What do you lose if you homeschool and then you're not putting yourself in these kind of situations?
What you lose is negative influences. One of the biggest things I think when it comes to homeschool is keeping my kids away from your bad kids. We've went and taken our children to pride parades. And you know what I mean? We've been there, we've been loving, and we showed support to the people there. But at the same time, we explain our views on the matter that we believe marriage is between a man and a woman. And from experience, and talking to people, I understand that a lot of people who choose that lifestyle, it is based on trauma. A lot of were molested or sexually assaulted as children. So I don't think it's okay for me to teach to my
Stitch incoming. You can see something brewing. Look at Edmund's face. I forget this person's name. Edmund. Something's about to happen.
children that this is something normal we ought to accept. When it doesn't progress society, we would not be able to procreate if everybody were to choose that lifestyle. So I think it's okay for me as a parent to say, hey, this exists, that exists, but this is our view on it, and this is how we want to present it to them.
Do you think it's somewhat problematic that you're going like, well, this is our viewpoint, that marriage is between a man and a woman because we can't move society forward with gay couples? Like, we have factually proven that incorrect. I could actually tell you that gay parents on average make exceptional parents and do exceptional things with kids because they adopt, and they only adopt kids when they are financially capable, which actually makes kids of gay parents actually more successful and academically competent. So gay parents actually are very good at moving society forward, and we have the statistics to prove
Could
it.
that be a long-term solution, though, if a large population chose to choose that lifestyle? There would be no children to adopt.
No one is choosing this lifestyle.
That's an opinion.
Okay,
It's not an opinion. It's just.
Okay, sorry.
Did you choose to be straight, sir?
I've been teaching for 15 years.
So
and
have I.
will say that there is some kids now that are going for that community that are doing it not out of a genuine, and there's pockets of them too. Like you'll notice like friend groups of girls that will all of a sudden decide that they're now trans.
The idea of LGBTQ being
This is a great point that this lady just brought up. Did you catch that? I saw this in the classroom as well. In the last couple of years that I was in the classroom before I retired and became a pastor, I saw more and more students identifying as trans, particularly young women. The New York Times wrote an article about this last year. They noted the CDC's findings that just in the last few years, the number of young people who identify as trans has almost doubled. Younger people are disproportionately identifying as trans. When you remember that 4 out of 5 youth who are gender questioning or gender confused essentially grow out of it. Did you know that? By the way, this, what I'm talking about right here, not the findings of Christians. This is from a psychiatrist who has presided over a decade's worth of youths who have transitioned. This is the doctor's findings. So what these parents are pointing out, like right now, as a real phenomena, that's really happening, and that needs some kind of explanation. Let's see what happens next.
Trending and the idea of teaching kids that being gay is a choice. Those are two very different.
So I answer that. Yes, I chose to be straight. Absolutely.
So
When?
you could,
Can you tell us about it?
so you
you
actually
consider the
you
alternative?
could be attracted to me if you wanted to be.
Absolutely.
Most people have no clue that in 2023, the best way to make money on
The best part is
Amazon
ads.
is not with physical.
Live.
Okay.
And let me explain. I have seen transgendered people who I thought were born female that were very attractive. I didn't know. Now, once I find out that that's not what you are, I am choosing not to pursue that. That's what I mean. So yes, you can be attracted to someone that is of another gender.
Let's talk about what do you think should be taught about gender identity in school? What do you think is being taught?
I want to go back to something you were saying earlier that's related to this about like you're seeing trends, and I am too, right? Last semester when I was teaching,
Everyone is seeing the trend. Everyone. What people need, especially from the LGBTQ community, is an explanation for this trend.
I had a trans kid in every classroom, and I was like, whoa, when I started teaching,
It was one in school.
there was none,
Yeah,
right?
one
And
in
I'm like,
school,
this
yeah.
is, wow,
And they
okay?
were really for it, too.
And
They like went for it.
And I'm hearing you that is something I'm seeing too in the classrooms. Fair, okay. Now, I'm not gonna presume to be in the heads of those kids and to understand like what's real for them or whatever, but I will tell you this.
Yeah, that's a head scratcher, guys. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. We just embraced LGBTQ values in the last couple of decades. It started with television and, the Will and Grace and all this stuff. And I don't know why kids are, all of a sudden there's like this trending thing going on, especially among young females that are all of a sudden explosion of identifying as trans. Man, that's a head scratcher, guys. I have no idea what's happening.
Historically speaking, a disproportionate number of kids who are gay, who are trans, who are any of the LGBTQI, fill in the letters, right? Didn't live to see adulthood. Maybe that's why we don't have an older generation of trans adults, because
I attended a funeral of a trans student last month.
a lot of them didn't make it. And so, but when I hear about kids like feeling comfortable enough to try expressing something where maybe they wouldn't be able to do in other spaces, and I understand that maybe.
Okay, so that's an acknowledgement that it's a choice, which I thought you dismissed this earlier, right? And so now, maybe they feel comfortable enough to try it, guys. That's an acknowledgement that it's a choice, right? Did you just do that?
It's not you want for your kids, but I'm thinking about the most marginalized and vulnerable people, and unfortunately, statistically, for our queer youth, disproportionately they fall in that category.
Mind you.
So this issue, I'm trying to stay on track. This was about education, guys. Okay, this is the issue of an explosion of youth identifying as trans. It is an issue. I mean, what is it? There are currently, what's the numbers? There are currently only 7% of the population that are between ages 13 to 25 right now. 7% of the population. And yet within that age bracket, 20% are trans. When you see this explosion, what you are seeing is the effect of the values of LGBT being inculcated to youth. And I'm not even talking about at school. I'm talking about in culture. I'm talking about in movies. I'm talking about music, social media. These specific values are being taught. And I'm proposing to you that the explosion of youth identifying as trans is the direct result of young people being influenced by these values. So that brings us right back to the issue once again. When it comes to schools, what are the values that a school and a classroom teacher should be furthering? Because there is no such thing as neutral, unbiased spaces for students. Every teacher is inculcating values in the classroom, and as parents, we should know what they are. We should know what to expect. And if these values don't align with ours, we should absolutely have the right to make necessary changes, to pull our children and take them somewhere where their character is being shaped in alignment with our Christian convictions. So now I'm going to speak as a Christian now. right? To take it back to school choice, there are a lot of myths surrounding school choice. I heard some furthered by a couple of people on the panel there. But I would encourage you to take a look at it if you're interested in going deeper. I think we'll bring this to a close. We're almost up in an hour here. Give you a couple of pieces of literature here, say a few things. One of the books to take a look at, so with regard to school choice, I think it's called School Choice Myths by DeAngelis and McCluskey. Okay. Some of the myths that the book tackles is that school choice is racist, that school choice creates segregation, that it takes money away from public schools. This is just not true. Let me give you another book to help you think through this issue. If you're trying to understand and define for yourself what the purpose of education is, what it looks like, take a look at Howard Hendricks' book, Teaching to Change Lives. Hendricks was a Christian and mentored, if I remember correctly, he mentored Dallas Willard and J.P. Moreland. Okay. I discovered Hendricks when I was in grad school. I was a grad student to become a teacher, and he blew my mind. Now, Teaching to Change Lives is like this thick, okay? So if you're not a book reader, you don't love to read, you can still get through it, guys. It's not a slog. As a matter of fact, I would pull it back out and reread it every year that I was teaching just to refresh, okay? Some parting thoughts. You know what my purpose is. You know, what my answer to the purpose of education is. It's about skills. It's about character development. So then which institution should we trust to do the job, right? Should we just homeschool? And my answer is, as long as whatever you choose aligns with your values and you trust the institution will develop skills and character in your child, go with it. That could be public school, guys. For some of you out there, your situation, that could be you. I know a lot of Christians adamantly opposed to all public school. Okay, I've said this before. There are public schools that exist that still teach values aligned with our Christian convictions. The number of them are shrinking, okay? That doesn't mean they don't exist. But maybe it's private school, maybe it's charter school. Maybe you feel like homeschool is the way to go. The wonderful thing is, if you're intentional and you know what the purpose of education is, you have options. But whatever you choose, remember, the Bible holds you responsible for your child's education. I'll end with this. Ephesians 6:4 again. Fathers, bring up your children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Okay? You are responsible for your child's education, however that looks. So there's my parting thoughts. All right, now it's your turn. What do you think? What is the purpose of education? What would you have said if you were sitting on this panel? I am thoroughly curious. Do you ever do that? You ever watch and you go, man, if I were up there, I'd be like giving him the 1, 2, 3. Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to get your thoughts. I don't know where my voice went just then. By the way, if you made it this far, thank you so much. You should join my Patreon community, guys. Come on. I'm actually about to start a new series of videos at the Patreon. One actually on how to study the Bible. Okay, so my Patreon community, they're going to help me by pilot testing it out for me. Okay, but listen, you'll also get early access to my videos. We'll get to chat more on one-on-one there in Patreon. And your support also helps me continue to devote more time to doing Wise Disciple. So thanks everybody for joining me. I will return soon with more videos. Got everybody in the live chat. Love you guys. Really appreciate you. Yeah, but I will return and we will do it again next week. All right. And in the meantime, I'll say bye for now.